Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. And today in Bible study we did Job chapters 36 and 37, which I had to push us to do, but I want to try and finish up Job by the new year. I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll see. But today was the ending of Elihu speaking. So for the past few weeks, we've been looking at Elihu, who's this new guy that shows up to kind of challenge Job and his friends and how they've been talking. But as I was reading this chapter, I was just struck by how similar Elihu's arguments are to Job's friends. And I thought it was kind of like hypocritical because he's going around telling them that they've misjudged the situation, but then he kind of says stuff that's familiar. For instance, like he says that Job has done something wrong and that's why he's kind of been punished, or that's just the same thing as his friends. And it just is weird because Elihu for these past two chapters has started to say things that are kind of different, but then in these two things that we read today kind of reverts. And then I did a little bit of a deeper dive, and this is where I brought people to this morning, which was to think about the sovereignty of God, because that's what Elihu's whole point is when he does this. Is just to talk about, hey, God can do all. I mean, that's what chapter 37 really is. The end of 36 through basically all of 37, Elihu is talking about God's power over the world. And this sets it up for God's response in chapters 38 through the end. But his whole point is to think about God's control and God's sovereignty over the situation. And he finds fault with Job, just like Job's three friends do. But unlike Job's three friends, they all put Job's fault before what happened to him, right? So you must have done something wrong because this is God bringing punishment for something you have done. Job didn't do anything wrong. And then Elihu comes along and says something really similar. But if you notice when Elihu is speaking about Job, when he's speaking about him, he's saying, you must have done something wrong after. You are doing. That's what he says. You are doing something wrong after. And he compares Job to these guys who think they're wise and who are haughty and not humble, right? His whole thing is he believes Job is being too proud, right? That he's demanding these things of God when instead he should be waiting and listening, right? Waiting and listening for God to speak to him instead of complaining outwardly to people. And I'm of two minds about that. So one, it is good advice, just generally, right? I do think that a lot of times we end up being these types of people that just immediately go to a woe is me type of thing. And that's not really the heart that we should have. Not even in the Old Testament or in the New Testament when suffering comes, right? Paul doesn't say that we should do that, right? Peter doesn't say we should do that. In fact, they say to rejoice when you're persecuted or when suffering happens and things like that. But at the same time, it's like we do want people to be able to express these things with God. And I think that's why Elihu's teaching is really good as a down-to-earth moment for Job, right? It's not the final word. God gets the final word, which is good. But Elihu is a good down-to-earth guy to really challenge us when we're in our suffering to think about these things. And this whole time, he's preparing Job to speak to God, because you'll notice that he talks about the whirlwind in this, right? He talks about storms that are coming, and that's where God speaks out of. So you can kind of picture the scene that Elihu is talking to Job, and he's telling him about all of these things. He's pointing to the things in nature that God has control over, and then he points to this storm, and he's using this as an image of, hey, like, this is life. You need to have humility before it. You need to have humility before God's power. And then next week, God steps in and speaks to Job, and we'll look at that. I'm excited to look at that. But one of the things that I think this always challenges us to think about is how comfortable we are with God's sovereignty in our lives. Do we really trust him to do these things for our benefit, right? That's what Elihu is saying. It gives us another opportunity to humble ourselves and to trust him. So that's Elihu's upshot of this. And I think that's good, and it's good from the abstract. But I think it lacks the one thing that God will bring when he speaks to Job in the next few weeks. But I think it's good, and I think that's a tough lesson that a lot of us need to hear, and I think that's something we should ponder. All right, everyone, that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow for our mailbag, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Peace out.